Yo everybody, what's going on? This is Keegan from Kman Reviews. If you enjoyed this review, make sure you hit that like and the subscribe button. And if you have any opinions at all that you would like to share, make sure to leave them down in the comment section. Talk Talk, Laughingstock. Talk Talk was an English band that underwent one of the most drastic and arguably most successful genre switch-ups I've ever seen. Originally a synth-pop quartet, the band had some pretty early achievements on the charts, with singles like It's My Life and their eponymous track, yet it wasn't until the mid-1980s that we got to see the new Talk Talk with their third album, The Color of Spring, a stylistic detour featuring much more organic instrumentation and a greater focus on pianos and organs. The band's fourth album, The Spirit of Eden, may have been a commercial flop, but the critical consensus eventually turned in the band's favor, with plenty of improvisational jazz, classical, and blues, and in the process helped to unearth a new experimental side of rock music now ubiquitously known as post-rock. But no doubt it is the band's last album, Laughingstock, that is one of the most well-remembered and celebrated albums in the genre's history, which is the album I am here to review today. Going into this album, the band's lineup had been slightly diminished after longtime bassist Paul Webb opted to leave the band after the release of Spirit of Eden. The then duo of Mark Hollis and Lee Harris created Laughingstock and subsequently disbanded shortly after. So let's not waste any more time. What are my thoughts on Laughingstock? Let's find out as I review this album track by track. Since there were no singles released for this album, we will just start at the top of the track list, with that being the opener Merman, which doesn't actually come into play until about 17 seconds in, letting the listener wallow in this silence before that soul guitar strum kicks off the record and begins the journey through the barren wasteland that is this song. It is so minimal and so stark that to my pop-adjusted mind, it's almost unnerving, yet I still can't help but feel so hypnotized with each rippling pluck of the guitar and each solid thud that is the bass, and the haunting piano and strings. Every single note on this song is solitary. You can feel the guitar, you can feel the bass just resonate throughout the mix. But in all honesty, I feel like it's also the notes that aren't played that deserve some attention. Silence truly is a virtue with this song, with the bounty of empty spaces creating this eerie, kind of unsettling atmosphere that is just so beautiful at times it genuinely left me speechless, which also helps to accentuate Mark Hollis' striking yet dismal lead vocals. Lyrically, the song presents this beautiful biblical poetry as the narrator seems to express this desire to enter the afterlife. I know there are also a few theories regarding this album and its content, but I'm not really going to get into any of those because if I did, I feel like I'd be here all day explaining that and how it compares to each and every line. As it stands though, this is an absolutely gorgeous track. Ascension Day, in comparison to Merman, is like night and day. Where Merman felt quiet and despondent, this one is almost glorious in comparison, instantly more upbeat. It's loud. It's probably the most memorable song on this album. For the more casual listen, it certainly was for me. This track definitely lives up to its title though, as the bulk of the composition is made up of grand, powerful musical ascents filled with crashing percussion, obstructive walls of guitars, all of which being separated by light, entrancing passages, with the hissing jazziness of the drum and the occasional puncture of a melancholic riff. Mark's vocals are sparingly used. The track does follow a traditional structure, but with the way Mark is singing, it almost just comes off like he's vocally riffing. It all just kind of feels second fiddle to the instrumental, which seems to gain a newfound melody in terms of his voice. I also really have to bring up the cacophony that is the outro, which just abruptly cuts off after the 6-minute mark. It definitely is a bit jarring how sudden the song ends, especially since it doesn't even transition into the next song at all. It's just dead, which actually fits these lyrics well, where if Merman is about wanting to enter heaven, Ascension Day is basically contemplating what would happen if you enter heaven, and how the narrator believes they will likely be condemned and punished for their sins. Just another amazing song. After the Flood, one of the longer tracks on this album, just over 9.5 minutes, and I just adore this one. It starts off nice enough, presenting a gentle, mellow vibe, but over the course of the first half of the track, we see this little nucleus that is the warm, tranquil piano gradually build more and more, with the addition of this wavering electronic ambience, buzzing chords, some occasional various noises scattered throughout, and a simple, head-bobbing percussion just to keep everything steady. It isn't even until 5.5 minutes in that the instrumental seems to flatline and slowly, and I mean very slowly, fades out around the 8-minute mark. There's also a variety of different solos gracing the track, one of which is this discordant guitar solo that, while it does definitely fit, it just comes off like a very loud, accidental distortion more than anything else. Mark's vocals, again, almost just blend in with the mix. He basically is an instrument at this point, but I think his droning, kind of slurred delivery really works for this, as he sings these lyrics about people like the narrator from the previous two tracks who have sinned, straying from the righteous path and being disturbed by God's vengeance. Again, amazing song. Taphead starts off so drab and glum that I almost expect it to give off the same emotive strength that Merman has. The downtrodden plucks of the guitar truly feel alone in this ensconcing darkness. Mark's vocals here are especially gutting, settling on a quivering, pained, and hushed tone that really just feels like the final words of a loved one who you treasured so dearly. The track then begins to build itself up with a mystical droning ambience accompanied by these shrill pierces of brass instruments that, if I'm using the same metaphor, could be the parting instrumental at like a funeral. Continuing on, the track presents some more improvisation with some heavenly strings, ominous looming percussion, and some guitar work that almost borders on sounding like an emergency alarm. Mark's vocals at this point of the song are all but lost in the mix, so quiet in fact that you can barely make them out without really focusing, as the song finishes off just as quietly as it began, with that lone guitar. I don't think I could really describe just how tense, ethereal, yet also horrifying this track is. It is incredible. Love this one. New Grass is the song that everyone seems to be gravitating towards on the record. This is the album's peak, and I can totally understand where those people are coming from. Compared to Taphead's unnerving vibe, New Grass almost feels like solace, the beauty after the madness. I adore how the moody guitar is juxtaposed with the understated piano to give a very serene and almost heavenly ambience to the song, and that feeling is only cranked up to 11 with the twinkling shots of the organ come in, which is all wrapped up neatly behind the hissing, fragile drum. It truly is a beautiful song, the emotional core of the record, and that's only proven more so when the piano with some newfound strings help to slow things down, and then the guitar returns only to shimmer with an elegant solo. It truly feels like I'm witnessing some miracle on this planet, life reborn again, or angels descending from heaven. It's a feeling I struggle to put into words. Lyrically, the track does corroborate the tone, where the rest of the album had this almost hopelessness to it. This time the narrator is actually longing for heaven after such strife and suffering painted throughout this album. He's finally hopeful. Please, just listen to this song for yourself. It's really something special. A once-in-a-lifetime song, probably my favorite here. And finally, the closer, Rune, has a similar atmosphere to Merman in that it is a very minimal song. The guitar feels shrouded in darkness, it's so heavy, and it doesn't really build up anywhere from there. It kind of hangs in this perpetual limbo, with Mark singing in a fittingly monotone and grim murmur. Purely on a sonic level, I feel like New Grass would have been a better closer, but in every other way, I think this track does a really good job to bookend the album. Most notably how it finishes lyrically, as this track seems to be from the perspective of God, decreeing our narrator's final judgment, and ultimately giving his blessing and deeming his dues to have been paid. Much like Merman, the song really takes advantage of how powerful silence can truly be, and I feel like that's especially demonstrated on the closing minute. Every strum here feels monumental after Mark's muttered the closing words to this album. From a tonal point of view, this really feels like the end. And the end of so many things for that matter. For the album, for the rich story it tells, for Talk Talk the band. I mean, just absolutely spellbinding. Overall, I mean, man, I went through a journey with this album. Honestly, one of the most beautiful pieces of music I've ever listened to. With this album being 30 years old this year, it's amazing how crisp and just so well-aged the project still is today in terms of the gorgeous use of minimalism, the tones, the improvisation. There really is no flaws to this record. I mean, come on, it helped to define a whole genre of music, so much so that in fact, pretty much every single album trying to follow in its footsteps would unfortunately be cursed with living in its shadow. And I don't really see that changing, maybe ever. This album is a landmark achievement. Go listen to this album if you haven't already. Rest in peace, Mark Hollis, and I am feeling one of the strongest 10s I've probably ever given on this channel. Well guys, hope you enjoyed that review. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Peace.